Kathryn Strachan, hello, welcome to Creative Conversations. How are you doing?
Good, yeah. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for joining today. I know you're absolutely slammed. I've seen a whole bunch of regular posts from you, particularly on LinkedIn, so I know how busy you are at the moment, both personally and across the business. So I really appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me today. And apologies if you hear a siren outside as well. That's to endorse we're in central London right now.
Yeah, proof that you're in London when there's
Yeah,
sirens going
exactly.
by.
So look, we're going to speak for half an hour or so, give or take. What I'm really keen to understand is a bit about your personal story, about your journey into starting and running CopyHouse, your agency, how you work, the type of clients you work with, and I guess how you maintain the culture within the business, and of course some of those aspirations for the future as well for the business, because it sounds like there's been some accelerated growth over the last few years. So it'd be really good to get under the skin of that as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Could you start? Look, we mentioned this just before we started recording, actually. What's been interesting for me is that I've known quite well those people I've spoken to previously in this forum. However, we've only met briefly once just before Christmas, and you struck me as someone who's very driven, has got a really interesting business and a really interesting approach to your business. So what's going to be great for me is to discover a bit more about you over the course of the time we're talking, but also to be able to share those stories and personal experiences as well. So what would be really useful is perhaps if you could just give a bit of an overview in your career and some of those highlights along the way that's led you to where you are today as well.
Yeah, certainly. It's a big question because there's a lot that's happened in a very
Okay,
short
good.
space of time.
Yeah.
I started Coffee House about 3 years ago when I hired my first employee. So it's been 3 years now, and we're a team of 25. So, really started from the ground up, and I didn't come from an agency background. I kind of came, well, after finishing my master's, I did work agency side for a little bit, but, I wasn't one of these people that had a massive network or, could draw or bring clients with me or could draw from that. So, we've literally had to build everything from the ground up. And I'm quite proud of, how far we've come and what we've done. And, we work with some really well-known clients now. So now we're a team of 25, all full-time permanent employees. We don't outsource any of the work that we do. So it's all full-time employees on payroll. And we work with some really cool clients like Klarna and Meta to deliver content marketing and copywriting services. Yeah, it's been a really crazy growth journey full of highs and lows. But yeah, it's still a lot of potential and a long way to go, both for me personally, but also for CopyHouse.
I captured this. You won't see it on the screen, but there was a post you made. I guess it was at the start of the new year. You talked about 6 years ago you can get hired for a basic admin job, and then you've gone through your countdown of 5 years, 4 years, and so on. You said you launched CopyHouse 3 years ago. What was it that inspired you to make that leap into the slight unknown, as you've almost touched on yourself there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I ever really wanted to be an entrepreneur. My dad is an entrepreneur, and I watched him growing up. I watched him have some massive lows and some really big highs. And, I saw him get hit by the 2008 economic recession. He was in property at the time, and I was about I was about 18, giving away my age, but I was about 18. And I watched him get totally hammered. And I don't think I've ever seen him that sad in my whole entire life. And it was really like, I mean, it's such a, like, I was 18, so it's quite a like transformative age as well.
Sure.
So I decided that I didn't want to be an entrepreneur. I wanted something stable. I wanted something secure. And for most of my 20s, I spent a lot of my 20s traveling. So I was getting lots of really great experience, and I've probably been to 120 countries, I think I last
Wow.
counted in that. But I didn't really achieve very much career-wise in my 20s. And I did an undergrad, and then I did a master's. And when I graduated my master's, I didn't really know what I wanted to do or, what I wanted to be. And I, started to experiment with career options. So that was about when I was applying for admin roles. And I was also pregnant at the same time. So I had, was married, but it was a little bit of a surprise. It was a little
Sure.
bit earlier than we maybe wanted, but,
Uh-huh.
we had been married for a few years. So it wasn't like it wasn't a scandal or anything. But I was newly graduated and pregnant, and nobody wanted to hire me for a basic admin job, which is kind of crazy
Yeah.
thinking about it. And yeah, I couldn't get into the industry. After my daughter was born, when she was really little, I did get a role at an agency, but they didn't treat me very well and paid me
Right.
really low. And, when I asked for a really small raise, I asked for like, they were paying me maybe 18, 19 grand a year. So like pretty
Yeah.
much nothing. And I asked for a 2K raise and they said no. So my husband, who's actually not very risk adverse at all, was like, you should just go freelance. Like you can do this. You can go out on your own and you can make it happen. So I was like, okay, fuck it, I will. And that's when I like went freelance and really started to aggressively go after it. And since then, well, it took about maybe 9 months to really build a nest egg and also, be able to start hiring.
Yeah.
And yeah, since then, the rest has been history. So, it wasn't an easy path into the industry, especially as, a female with a young child.
Sure.
But those experiences kind of pushed me, and having a dad who was an entrepreneur showed me that I could do that. That
Uh-huh.
if you can't get a seat at the table, pull up a lawn chair,
Nice.
to
I like that.
make your own
Yeah.
way, and bust through those walls or those glass ceilings. Um, there's always a path there.
And you, when you first started talking, you mentioned there's been some highs and lows. What have been some of those lows that have come along, and what have you learned from them?
Um, About a year ago, we lost a big
Mm-hmm.
client. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
really like well, I know now it's a really common story in agency
It is.
world
Yeah. Yeah.
where,
Yeah.
you have a client that's maybe 30 or 40% of your books. And one day you don't have that client. And
Yeah.
it's kind of a oh shit situation where you have to figure out a way forward. So we lost a large client back in March. And, when we first took them on, they were maybe like 50, 60% of our books. So we worked really hard to water them down, and we worked with them for about 10, 11 months, but we had a change of contact in the
Mm-hmm.
business. Really common reason. A lot of agencies have, yeah, have shared with me their stories. When it first happened, I thought that I had failed, that I had, you know, done something wrong. And it wasn't until I started talking to people who have been in the industry a long time, people who have been doing their agencies for a while,
That's it.
who are really well established, who I look up to, as people who are, legends. And they all have a story about the time that a really large client walked out the door.
Yeah.
And pretty much anybody who's been around long enough knows that that is just something that happens. So it wasn't me. So the first lesson from that was this stuff happens. It's not you.
Yeah.
And that you also have a future on the other side of that, and it's not going to totally ruin everything. We did have to reset and we had to restructure, and that wasn't
Mm-hmm.
very nice either. But what it also did was it created opportunity for us to not be overly reliant on one client. So today it's almost a year since that happened, and today we are past the past where we were a year ago, but this time we don't have any one client that we're overly reliant on. All of our clients are under 10% of our books, so if anyone left, like we never want to lose a client. We'd be really sad. We like them all. We try really hard to make our clients happy and deliver really high quality work. But if one of them left, it wouldn't be the end of the world.
Yeah.
It wouldn't cause so much upset. So we're in a much stronger place than we were, even a year ago when we were overly reliant on that client and they hadn't left yet. So I think the moral of the story is that these things happen, and to not beat yourself up, but also your business is often stronger after those down periods. You might have turmoil, or you might have something really difficult that happens, but when you get to the other side of it, you'll undoubtedly be stronger than you were before.
Look, I totally agree. I totally agree. I mentioned briefly before, again, we started recording that I've run agencies in the past. I can relate to that story 100%, but having that resilience to have some perspective on the situation, I think is really, really important, I think, for any agency owner, for any business owner, whether they're in the sector or outside of the sector. So I can totally see where you're coming from in that regard. You very casually dropped in when you were talking about CopyHouse. You've got some great blue chip clients. You've got a team of 25 full-time staff. How has the business evolved then over the last few years? Have you changed your service offering? Have you changed your approach? Have you become more structured in your thinking? What have been some of the really key gear changes that you put in place, and how have you done that?
All of the above.
Okay.
All of the above, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, 3 years ago, it was just me and the one employee who I still talk to this day. He left to move to the US to marry his partner. But yeah, it was just us. I mean, so today it's completely different. It's 110% different. I mean, everything's changed. We no longer only just do copywriting, we do content strategy, and then in content production, we do copywriting, content design, and B2B social.
Yeah.
And B2B social is our newest service. It's been going for about 5 months, but has massively taken off. There's a lot of demand for building strong company and individual profiles on LinkedIn, and nurturing and building communities. So that's massively taken off. We have a whole structure. I'm not involved in any of the day-to-day. I mean, I used to think I was a copywriter. I don't get involved in any of that anymore. I mean, we have a content director who oversees all of that, and he came in with 20, 30 years of experience. And one day I just looked at him and I was like, that is what that, like, a content director looks like. I was not that. Like, and my protege, who was with us for a long time, he took us really far, but he could only take us as far as I could take us, because he only knew what I had taught him, because I had trained him from the ground up. So when he left to move to the States, and we hired a proper content director who had been in the industry for 20, 30 years, the things that he knows, the way that he looks at things is far beyond anything that I could have done. And he's built a really strong creative team, and I'm not involved in any of that. If you asked me to write a blog, I wouldn't even know where to start. I tried the other day. There was like a grant application that was due, and I didn't know how to do it anymore. So it was just answering some basic questions in writing about things like, who do we work with, and like questions that I knew the answers to, but I didn't even know how to start writing it. So I had to have a copywriter help me.
But that's the key to any successful business owner, right? Put good people around you, and make sure that they've got the strengths and skills that are going to make the business that much better, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't do any of it. I mean, we have a client service team, and we have a head of ops, and our head of ops, we've been through 2 project management systems. We are on ClickUp, and he just put in Synergist about a year ago. And, he does all of our processes and all of our systems, but, even like his world has completely changed. He started as a part-time project manager, and now he's like our head of ops. And yeah, knows everything that goes on in the business and runs all of that. We have account managers who do all the client relations. We have a head of people who does all of the talent and recruitment, and a marketing manager that does all the marketing. I basically go to lunch. I do a lot of lunches and dinners and events and socializing.
Yeah.
And I do a little bit of sales, but we're getting ahead of growth in March. So we're getting ahead of growth really soon.
Brilliant.
And I won't be doing sales anymore either.
So just the lunches and dinners then?
Yep.
Sounds like a good gig. I wanted to touch on culture. You talked about you got a head of people there. So am I right in saying that you are a remote only business?
Yeah, we're fully remote. I mean, we started hiring in January 2020. It was the first time I had ever hired an employee. And as we all know, the pandemic happened, 2 months later. So we grew a lot during the pandemic. We grew a lot during a time when like idea of even having an office was not, you couldn't even entertain that idea,
Yeah.
it didn't exist. There was months and periods where we weren't allowed to leave our house.
Yeah, of course.
And, so we stopped thinking about where we were hiring and hired people based on the skills and the talent that we needed in the business. And, we started to attract clients from across, the UK and the world as well. So, I mean, we were originally set up in Edinburgh, up in Scotland.
Yeah.
And one day, well, I traveled Latin America with my family for a year. And when I came back in August, I looked around and realized that my life was in London, and I
Yeah.
hadn't ever built it that way. I lived in London for 5 years before having my daughter and moving to Scotland. And, when I left London the first time, I never thought I would come back. I never thought that I would live here again. I'd found it a really lonely place. I'd been really isolated before. And, I came back in August and realized that literally every person I knew and all of my friends and all of our clients and all the events and everything that I really wanted to be at was in London.
Hmm.
So I've come back, and I've moved down here and yeah, I've built a really nice life. And every day I've got something or someone that I'm seeing or something that I'm doing. And this year, a big focus of our marketing is in-person events. So we're hosting at least 2 events every single month, and all of those are in London. So yeah, we forgot about location and then woke up and, I needed to be in London, but the rest of the team, they traveled to London and, we're traveling a lot
Yeah.
more these
Yeah.
days. We're on the road a lot to, run workshops in person or, meet clients in person to do things like that. But we most of the time don't need to be in any one set fixed location.
So from a cultural perspective, when you bring people into the business and from an agency point of view, they're getting used to ways of working and what the CopyHouse ethos is all about. How have you found that over the time that you've gradually recruited people and built that team and all that long list of resources you've just gone through?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because people always kind of assume that just because you're remote and you don't see somebody every day means
Yeah.
that you won't have the same like quality of a
Hmm.
relationship. And I met one of our project managers for the first time ever last week,
Right.
and
Yeah.
we had been working together for like uh, a year maybe. But, meeting her in person was absolutely no different than, our normal day to day. It wasn't like a big revelation or, well, I discovered she was maybe a little bit shorter than I anticipated. And, we had a client meeting together and spent some time together, but, it didn't add anything that wasn't already there. We already had a really good relationship. So I think you can build really good relationships working remotely, but it's about good communication and
Sure.
over communicating and still spending time to talk and to learn about
Yeah.
each other's lives. And at the end of the day, all relationships are built on communication. And just because you're in the same building or in the same office space doesn't mean you have good communication. The two aren't
Yeah.
um exclusive. You can be in the same building and not have good communication. You can be in the same building and have great communication. It's
Hmm.
all about intent. And one of the things that we're quite good at is being intentional and, over communicating and really talking about pretty much everything. um
There's a couple of questions which come to mind there. Do you think it's got any relevance or bearing that you've always been that way, as opposed to an organisation that may have started in a more traditional environment, then because of circumstances you had to go remote, then you had to come hybrid, so that may have created confusion. Whereas for you, CopyHouse has always had this setup, you've always had this way of working, and therefore the means by which you do engage and communicate with those that you work with have been laid out from day one.
Maybe. I don't really know because I've
Mm.
never been in the situation where we had a, office-based culture and then had to go remote and then back to hybrid. So I don't really know because I've never been in the opposite boat. I've only really been in my boat.
Yeah, sure. No, that's fair enough. You talked about that notion of being intentional. Are there any particular channels or platforms that you're using that you've found to be particularly effective for the business and
Well,
working within it?
we live on Slack.
Right. Okay.
So we're slacking all day, every day.
Yeah.
But the team, use Synergist to like manage all of our projects, and yeah,
Hmm.
we're always on our phones. So I don't think I could really not have my phone because I like being able to just call and have a sometimes you have a bit more of like an informal conversation if
Yeah.
you're just on the phone rather than on like a Zoom call. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing crazy. I mean, we use Office Vibe to keep an eye on company culture and
Yeah.
provide a metric for those sorts of things and look at what can be improved. I mean, we have systems and metrics and tools for pretty much every element of the business. So it is something that we keep a really close eye on. But I'd probably just say Slack is our main like channel of communication. We and normal phone calls.
Yeah. Normal phone calls. Okay. Got it. You spoke about 10, 15 minutes ago about other agency owners, legends of the business. I forget what phrase you used. Who do you turn to for advice that enables you to feel like you firstly got a sounding board, and secondly, you're able to make a bit of an informed decision about anything you might be doing that affects the future of the business?
So I've got my senior leadership team.
Yeah.
So I've got a head of ops and a content director and a head of
Yeah.
people. And, they're consulted on most things. And our head of ops has been my left hand for 4 years and
Yeah.
knows pretty much everything in the business and feels a real sense of ownership as well. So takes a lot of responsibility. So they're part of my council. I also have a couple of really fantastic mentors out in the wild. One of which who doesn't even work in the agency world but works at
Yeah.
a large fintech. And then we have two non-executive directors. So we work with Spencer Gallagher and Peter Hoole
Hmm.
to we do a 4-hour monthly board meeting with them every
Yeah.
month and go through all the elements of CopyHouse, and they help to advise us as well.
Great stuff. Because there's often the sense that some business owners feel they're operating a bit in isolation. So it's good that you've got that support network around you, because I think it's important to be able to feel you can turn to different people according to the nature of what needs to be discussed, addressed, whether it's in the immediacy or with some longer term plans in mind as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you have to be alone. It can be lonely, but
Mm.
I have so many agency friends and we have a really strong network of external advisors. Got a great legal team and really good accountants and there it depends on the problem. You're maybe not going to go to your accountant with a legal problem, but whatever the problem is, there's somebody there who can help you. And then we have a really strong network of I have a really strong network of other founders. So am hosting a lunch tomorrow with female founders. And that's just a chance to connect. And on Thursday, there's another lunch with fintech founders because we do a lot of work in the fintech space.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's another opportunity to connect. And we run those events every quarter. So we're running them really regularly and really getting a chance to kind of just have a chat. And yeah, I mean, I think in life in general, you can be lonely, but
Yeah.
there's always a way to fix it. There's always somebody who's willing to chat because most people are nice and most people like talking.
I do.
So, all
Yeah.
you have to do is maybe like put yourself out there a little bit and yeah, maybe tell people what's going on as well. Because they can't help you if you don't tell them.
Sure. What do you do, or what is it that enables you to challenge yourself and drive forward? You've achieved a lot in a relatively short space of time. You've established a successful business. You've got some great growth. But what is it that enables you to challenge yourself to keep pushing forward?
I think I'm insane.
Okay, that's good. Ah, you've got quite a nice self-deprecating way about you, but clearly there's something in there that's enabling you to generate the success that you've had. And it's probably something more than insanity.
Yeah, I think it's in my nature. It's always been in my nature. I've always done 10 million things at once and always pushed it and, seen how far I can take something. So I've never, in my whole life, I've never been very good at sitting and just being okay with,
Mhm.
exactly where I was. And I've always wanted to go one step further, to travel to a new country, or I graduated high school in, 3 years instead of normally in the US, it's 4. And I
Yeah.
did it in 3 because I just wanted to move on to the next stage. And I've always been really impatient and yeah, always fit a lot into a little space of time. So it's not unlike me. Yeah, I think there's just something in my nature that drives me to always push for more.
What what advice would you give to someone that was in your position that may be in freelancing or just searching for something else, or maybe thinking about taking the leap that you did to starting their own venture?
I'd maybe have a think about what you're getting into
Yeah.
before you
Okay.
get into it. So I think
Yeah.
a lot of people go down the agency route not actually knowing how hard it is, and it is really hard. So I mean, you're gonna have to want it, and you're gonna have to fight through it, because it's not always gonna be easy. Of course, there's gonna be really good months where everything goes 110% to plan, but then
Mm.
there's gonna be bad months where like nothing goes to plan, and you're gonna have to be okay with that. You're gonna have to be resilient and be able to push through. And if you are more of the kind of person who doesn't like to take risks, or doesn't like uncertainty, or doesn't like risk, then don't do it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely great advice. My one final question, and thank you for everything you've covered because you've fired through everything, is what does the future look like for CopyHouse?
Yeah, well, world domination is
World
definitely
domination.
in my agenda.
Not too many grand ambitions then.
No, not too many. Yeah, I mean, we're going big. We want to become the number one content marketing agency for B2B tech in the UK and in Europe. We're expanding our services. We've got a lot of work we want to do to
Yeah.
bring the social media up to the same level that the copywriting is at in terms of scale, and size of the team. So yeah, we have a lot of growth that we want to do over the next 5 years or so. And yeah, we're going big. Go big or go home, right?
Well, I think that's the perfect way to round off this conversation, to be honest. That's brilliant. Kathryn, thank you so much for your time. I know that's going to be really interesting. Yeah, I'm really grateful for you spending some time to take us through your story.
No worries. Thank you for having me.